for joining us on San Francisco Revival.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Should immigrants feel safe in San Francisco?
So that is a kind of a loaded question in so many ways. I think, right now, many of our immigrant communities are having a mixed sense of safety, of a lot of feelings. We are seeing that many of our immigrant communities are living in fear. They are very nervous about accessing city services, resources, and reaching out to the city in general. And one of the things I will remind our folks is that we are a sanctuary city. We do have policies in place that generally prohibit the local city government from working and collaborating with federal agencies, especially federal law enforcement agencies. And these are meant to help our residents feel safe so they can access city resources. And what that means is call 911 if there's an emergency, making sure that they feel comfortable coming to a city-sponsored clinic, making sure that folks feel comfortable reaching out to any type of service the city has to offer. If they're a witness in a crime, we want them to feel safe. But that said, we can't prevent federal agencies to come into San Francisco and enforce federal laws. We cannot prevent them from doing their work or interfere with their work. So with that said, we want everybody to feel safe and continue utilizing city services and resources.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of that in Chicago right now, right? I just saw a video this morning of someone being picked up from the middle of the street by people claiming to be ICE. There was an operation, I think, a few days ago where they took people from an entire building, right? So even with these sanctuary city laws, there's only so much local government can do when the feds show up, right? And when, because I don't know if it's going to be an if at this point. Mm-hmm. So, we have a immigration court in San Francisco, and it seems like every day there's some news story about someone being picked up, someone who's there for an official asylum hearing, and they're being taken. What kind of goes through your mind when you see that, when you hear about that, knowing that even though we might not have jurisdiction, it's still happening within the city of San Francisco?
It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking to see when our communities are trying to follow the process, trying to do things that were outlined for folks to follow so they can go to their hearings, go to their ICE check-ins, and still being detained, removed, so it's really heartbreaking to see. I think, in San Francisco, early on when the new federal administration stepped in, we started seeing targeted arrests, right? Mm-hmm. Which we have seen in the past for many years. And, people being picked up at their homes or job sites. And then we started seeing folks being detained at their ICE check-ins. As you may know, if you're part of seeking asylum, you have to do check-ins with ICE every so often, every 6 months to a year. And now we're seeing folks being detained when they go into court hearings, which is, again, really heartbreaking. And I think what's really important is folks to stay informed and get the resources before they go to the court hearings. Check in with an attorney to understand what are their options. Can they petition for a remote court hearing via WebEx so they actually don't have to be present in the courtroom? Can they extend when the court hearing will take place? So again, I think it's heartbreaking. I think, folks should stay informed, get connected to their city resources or get connected to attorney resources so they know what their rights are and what they can do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the one of the benefits of living in the San Francisco Bay Area is that we do have, I'm sure compared to a lot of other places in the country, a strong network of organizers, advocates, immigration attorneys, nonprofits, rapid response networks that can serve as a support system for a lot of communities. Obviously, it's not, it hasn't necessarily been enough, but it kind of points to some of the resistance that folks can find, hopefully some shelter in, right? When we talk about this issue of safety, it isn't just about whether someone feels protected from ICE or protected from discrimination. Safety also means having access to safe and secure housing, access to economic stability and services in their preferred language. So in terms of those sectors, how do you see immigrants faring in San Francisco?
That's a very loaded question in so many ways. But, in my office, one of the things we try to do is to make sure that we're addressing the gaps, that we're working closely not only with community leaders, community advocates, and residents directly and understanding what the needs are, so we can bring that information back to City Hall, to other city departments, and say, hey, this is what we're noticing in the immigrant space. This is what we notice in the immigrant community, and how can we work with you to address them? And one of the biggest things that we work on in our office is that language gap that we see. We do have the language access ordinance in the city that requires city departments to provide vital services in a number of languages, including Chinese, Spanish, and Tagalog, along with English. And because of that, we're able to work very closely with departments to say, hey, that service should be available in these languages or that language. And when we know that when immigrants, especially LEP immigrants, limited English speaking proficient immigrants, come to the city and there's materials, resources offered in their language, or somebody speaks their language, they're very likely not only to access them or get informed about, but actually using them. And I think we want to see more of that. So not only when it comes to language access, but when it comes to all other services the city has to offer. And just recently, we saw also a report by a local paper that shared that in addition to immigration, Latinos have a high exposure to crime, and whether it becomes a victims of crime and other things that are reported. So we're trying to make sure that we're staying inside the table that's addressing these solutions when it comes to city government. So
yeah, definitely. And approaching someone in their preferred language, in their native language, also I think goes a long way in building some level of trust between communities and governments that they might not often trust from the get-go, right? And so, yeah, I think it's a good thing.
If I can add one thing that's also, it's more to make clear, I've been, especially the spaces that I've been to in recently, to know the difference between your city government, your county government, your state government, and your federal government. Many of our communities sometimes, even folks who've gone to school here, who've lived here, get them all mixed up, and we're not all the same. I think in San Francisco, we are very fortunate that our city and county are the same body, the same government, and that we share a lot of similar values, and in terms of with our residents, which are very different than what our federal government may be feeling at this time. And I think it's important to know the difference between each layer of government and when accessing resources, when coming to access those types of services.
And what to expect when you're going to each layer as well, right? Because the experience is going to be very different talking to someone from local office as opposed to state, but then definitely, of course, on the federal side. Especially when you want your own language spoken. I think that's being taken away more and more.
That's exactly true.
Or even mandated to be taken away by the feds nowadays too. So you spoke a little bit about your office, the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs. So what role does your office play kind of between let's just say it, the more authoritarian aspects of government and the more community-serving aspects of government? Like, where do you all fit? What do you see as the role of OCEIA?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking that. I talked about the different layers of government already. I think we're a local city and county office. We sit under the city administrator's office, which is a kind of equivalent to a city manager's office in other places. And what's important about where we sit is that it creates a sense of neutrality in terms of our service provision. We try to make sure that we're addressing services and in a way that they're not as politicized. And one of the key roles that we play is staying engaged with community, understanding what the needs are, not only from our residents, meaning either they're newcomers, folks who've been here for many years and are immigrants to the city, and also our small immigrant business owners, understanding, or nonprofits, advocates, others, understanding what the needs are, and bridging and bringing that information back to City Hall, to city government, so we are meeting the needs in place. And then also sometimes it's relaying messaging from City Hall or from other departments back to community. I know that sometimes when folks call our office asking for services or resources, or inquiring about a certain department and how to access resources, we also play that connecting bridge, or the connecting link, if you will, with community. We also have, the Immigrant Rights Commission. So we worked alongside an Immigrant Rights Commission, which is commissioned about 15 individuals from various immigrant communities, and we work very closely with them to inform policy making. Their role is to advise the mayor of San Francisco and the board of supervisors and what the immigrant communities are seeing as needs. So we, as an office, alongside the Immigrant Rights Commission, play that bridge between community and City Hall.
Mm-hmm. You spoke a little bit earlier about there being some gaps still that might need to be filled or might need some additional attention. Can you speak to a bit of what those gaps are and what are areas of investment that are still needed for immigrant communities in San Francisco?
Yeah, that's, I think in many communities, including our immigrant communities, we're seeing there's a need for more investment, right? The pandemic feels like it was far away, but it's actually the impacts are still being felt in our immigrant communities. And with the changing landscape from the federal level, I think creates a whole new set of needs that are becoming more apparent. And, I know that in the moment right now, we've talked about additional legal services, right? And not just, defensive legal services, but they're now getting into specifics of the types of legal services that are needed in our communities. But in addition to that, some of the growing needs are around mental health. Mm-hmm. I think, right now we haven't we're starting to see some of the impacts that the federal government is policy making is causing on our neighborhoods and our communities, right? The stress levels, the anxiety, the fear, people withdrawing from civic life, not going to school, not going to medical appointments. So that withdrawal, I think, from being active and trying to be vibrant in the neighborhood, trying to be out and about, that when you're forced to go into the shadows, can really bring some health issues. And I think we're slowly hearing more about that. And I think that is a space that we will need to think more about. And the other very important one is workforce opportunities and economic opportunities. Many, because of the changing shifts from the federal level, there's a lot of folks who've been here for many years, and whether they were on protected status or mixed family statuses, now they are being impacted where their work permits are being revoked. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you can't work anymore. And these changing policies are causing a lot of families, a lot of mixed status families, to not have the ability to work or feel comfortable going to work anymore. Mm-hmm. Some businesses, because of that fear, are also proactively laying people off. So, or businesses are closing down, so they're not employing folks from our community as they used to. So, thinking about how do we become more creative in supporting our immigrant community so they have economic pathways to ways to have access to revenue that allows them to be contributing members, help out their family, pay their rent, just basic needs is something that we're seeing.
The fear issue is like so real and felt and kind of seen around the city, especially around civic engagement. Mm-hmm. We had a hearing at City Hall maybe a month or so ago, and we were trying to do some turnout for it from the mission, primarily from immigrant communities. And some of the pushback we got, or the reluctance we got, was people were afraid of going to City Hall, even though it's as you mentioned, city and county of San Francisco, a place where immigrants should feel safe and not feel under the threat of federal immigration enforcement. But the fear is real and the fear is there, right? And we were asking people to come out for a housing issue, and people are afraid to go to, the people's hall, the people's chambers, right? Because they didn't feel included in that definition of people. And they felt they showed up, that they were going to get picked up somehow. And so it's, on the immigration field, on economics, on housing, on everything, it's a very precarious situation for a lot of communities. And honestly, I feel like it just creates a lot of civic instability and social instability that is not pertinent to the values that, we have etched in our concrete all over this city and country.
That's very real. And we had the Immigrant Rights Commission had a hearing early January before the federal administration stepped in, and we had 3 rooms full of folks from community there because the topic was how to prepare and respond to the new federal administration. Since then, I think you're seeing probably the drop down in engagement, and we're having another one on local law enforcement and what the city's doing when it comes to the federal agencies playing a role in their enforcement locally, how we're responding. We're having another hearing at the end of October 27th. We're happy to share more information with you and your audience. But I think we want to see who's willing to engage more civically in that conversation. But I also know that in my office, we're going to be very intentional to make sure that even though remote participation is not currently the city policy, how can we allow folks to still listen in, to hear what we're doing, even if it's through a remote attendance. We want to make sure that we are providing interpretation and that we're providing the information in different languages so people know what the meeting is about and how they can engage before and after the meeting with us. So
yeah, that'd be great if it can be done. The Immigrant Rights Commission has also in the past gone to different neighborhoods, like left City Hall, gone to different neighborhoods to hold hearings. Do you think that's something that could be valuable and possible?
Of course, that's usually it's a strategy that the commission has followed to include more folks from the community to participate. This one in particular, we are hosting at City Hall because we also know that if we take it to community, we might be putting community at risk in some way or another. And I think it's thinking about the remote options, even if it's through just listening in or sending questions in advance to the commission. Perhaps it might be a way for them to stay engaged.
Yeah, definitely. What do immigrants bring to San Francisco and really this country as a whole?
Wow. Where do I start? Because I could go through the laundry list of contributions immigrants bring to San Francisco.
Outside of both of us, obviously.
Yeah, I think so. In San Francisco, 1 out of every 3 residents is foreign born. So we know 1/3 of our population is an immigrant. And so it's a huge constituency of San Francisco and local government. We know that we contribute over about $70 billion just in economic strength that we bring to the city. And we pay about $2.5 billion in taxes. Right? That's a huge contribution we're making. And it's sorry that I'm going directly to economic contribution, but I think it's important to know.
And it's a point that the other side, multiple sides really always bring up as a counter.
Exactly.
Right? That immigrants don't pay taxes. They're kind of just taking from the American economy instead of actually being a positive economic contributor. Sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. And I was just going to add, we're about 40% of the workforce in San Francisco, which is a huge number, right? And I think not only when it comes to the economic figures, but also just the vibrancy that we bring to the different neighborhoods in San Francisco, from the small business owners who bring their own culture, who bring their own food, who bring their own wares and things to sell. The idea that we put on parades and festivals and street fairs that are culturally relevant and create a sense of belonging and welcoming, I think adds to the vibrancy of San Francisco. And I think that is really difficult to measure, but I think the belonging is very important, especially in these days when people feel like they don't belong. So I like to see the fact that we're having, I know recently there was like the lowrider parade, King of the Streets, right? Parade with community leaders. And it's great to see how we're doing things bigger and better than before, because I think it speaks to like we're loud and proud and we want to be here. And I think doing that in this time is very important, especially for folks who feel insecure, who are living in fear. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great counter strategy as well to a lot of the national attacks, right? That like, we're not going to be silenced. We're actually going to be louder. We're going to be prouder, and we're going to be screaming our contributions, our belonging, our sense of connection to this city, to this country, even louder than before.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's a necessary piece that has to be there in order for, for any of this work to move forward, for any people who might feel afraid to feel like, oh, maybe I don't have to feel so afraid, right? Like, I mean, you're safe in the community that you're in.
Right.
And I mean, it's so many of our neighborhoods are defined by the immigrant experience and the immigrant contributions there, right? You have the Mission, which obviously is a hub of the Latinx immigrant community, but even before that was a hub for the Irish immigrant community. You have Chinatown, that is defined by the Chinese immigrant community, North Beach, Italian immigrants. I mean, the TL has immigrants from dozens of countries, right? That's where I grew up. I grew up with folks from all over Asia, the Middle East, Africa, etc., right? Like, it's the reason why these neighborhoods are popular destinations, are distinct, have character, is because of the immigrant roots of these neighborhoods, not anything despite of it.
And I'll also add, I mean, I think the fact that we're Latinos in particular are also moving into different neighborhoods in San Francisco and bringing their own vibrancy to others, like the Bayview and the Sunset. We're seeing trends, things shift across the city. And I think it's important for us, especially as local government, to be aware of where folks are living, to making sure that we're reaching those communities and being intentional and saying, hey, like, yes, there's Latino community in the Mission, but also there's a growing population that we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye out and serving in those other neighborhoods, right? And I think that speaks to how we have a presence in a lot of neighborhoods. We have a presence, and we bring a vibrancy into a lot of locations. So
100%. Like, San Francisco has been through a lot, continues to go through a lot, and like, sometimes the confrontation with everything that's coming towards us makes us lose sight a bit of the resiliency that oftentimes is kind of so innate in our communities. So like, what's something that you are most hopeful about when it comes to immigrant communities, immigrant resilience, when it comes to life in this city?
What gives me hope, it's something I alluded to earlier, is that we have a lot of shared values in San Francisco. And, we've already used the term, we live in a bubble. And I like to believe that because of that gives me hope. The majority of the residents in San Francisco, local government, generally our values align around protecting our immigrants, being welcoming to our immigrant neighbors, right? Making sure that we're watching out for our most vulnerable. And I think that gives me a lot of hope, because I think whatever comes our way, we will stand together, right? We will move forward and say, hey, no, we're all standing next to our immigrant neighbors. So that gives me a lot of hope. Also, I think what also happens in a moment of crisis, a moment of a lot of, attacks on our communities, there's a lot of young leadership that comes from those spaces. And I think we're seeing a lot of that happening now in San Francisco, where there's a kind of an emergence of new leaders in our immigrant communities. And I that gives me hope, because we may be products of our previous generation, that we can sit here and have this conversation and speak to how we are working on making change, whether it's in policy, whether it's locally providing services to our residents and community members. But I think it gives me hope that we have a lot of young leaders step into the space, which we need. So
yeah. I mean, without a cohort of young folks to follow us, then this work is not really going to go anywhere, right? And really, as we kind of age into whatever our ages may be, they need to be the ones to define what the struggle looks like, to define what the movement looks like, based on their experiences, based on their creativity, because that's really the fuel that's necessary in order to really propel us from, the place we're at now to hopefully a place of progressing on these issues, right? Like every movement, every civil rights movement, every housing movement, et cetera, has benefited from that energy of young folks coming in and like really taking the reins and defining it as their movement for themselves, right? Without folks like us, we can provide some commentary, but not necessarily defining it ourselves from our own lens.
That's great.
So how do you stay connected to immigrant communities while still managing the interest of government office?
It's a balance, right? It's a balance of a lot of things. But I think the way that I try to make sure that I stay connected is being in immigrant spaces as much as I can. Whether it's in a community meeting that a community organization is hosting, being invited to different spaces where I'm listening from different perspectives, whether it's from our healthcare promotores and promotoras, right? Whether it's to our legal service providers, trying to make sure that I'm in different spaces so I can hear directly from them, making sure that I'm connecting with my own immigrant neighbors, right? To hear their stories and what's going on, right? Because sometimes they will have a perspective that, maybe their leaders are not sharing, right? Or it's a little different, and that's one of the ways I try to make sure that I stay connected, is being in spaces as much as I can, so I'm hearing directly from individuals and organizations, community leaders, on what the needs are. I also mentioned the Immigrant Rights Commission. It's one of those spaces where not only are commissioners, but also folks who come and provide public comments share their stories, and helps me stay grounded to okay, this is what's happening in community. This is what's going on. So I try to formally and informally, again, try to stay connected in as much as I can to our immigrant communities. So.
What keeps you motivated in times like these, where you see a lot of struggles between feds, local communities, see a lot of fear, anxiety? What gets you coming back to work? What gets you thinking that, no, we can push through this?
So I'm going to get personal.
Yeah.
So
please.
I think my strongest motivation are my parents, my family, right? So immigration is a personal issue to me. And my entire career has been focused on resource distribution, making sure that the most vulnerable have access to information, have access to resources, can actually utilize the resources and services that are available. And I think when I think of who am I trying to serve, who am I trying to make this better for? My parents, people like my parents, who were farm workers, immigrant farm workers, who eventually owned a little business, a farm, right, in the Central Valley. And so I think of all the the immigrant business owners in San Francisco. I think of all the immigrants who just recently arrived, right, who were escaping hardship, political or economic or war or otherwise, or Mother Nature caused troubles in their country, and whatever reason why they're here, how can I make sure that they have the resources and access to services that my parents were seeking for, right? Because of somebody came along and was able to help out my parents apply for that small business loan. They were able to move along and do other things, right? So that keeps me motivated. That they remind me of like why I do this work every day. But also like on an everyday basis, when somebody calls the office and I hear, oh yeah, they were looking for legal services, or that family wanted to apply for this program at that department, or, that youth who is now part of their Dream SF fellowship program, who is now getting real life experience at a local CBO, like those little like instances, those nuggets of like wins is what keeps me motivated, because I know that made a difference for somebody that day, and anyhow that makes me kind of just want to continue doing this, because I know at various levels I'm contributing to the conversation and I'm making a difference. So,
one of our guests last season, Andrea, was a former Dream SF fellow. She's now a staff attorney at GetSN, the Central American Resource Center. She came to do some Know Your Rights stuff here, and I used to work with her down in the past. So you mentioned a little bit about your parents' story. Can you share a little bit more about what your immigrant story is?
Yeah, so
like your families.
Yeah, so both my parents are immigrant farm workers from Zacatecas in the state of Mexico, and they came really young. And there's a lot of things that happen in between, but eventually, I was fortunate enough, if you will, to be born here, to be a citizen where I don't have to constantly watch the fear. But we would go back after the harvest season would end in November, early December, back to Mexico. So I would spend most of the winter in Mexico with my family, and we did that all the way up to like about high school, when our parents realized, oh, you all are falling behind in school. We need to send you back earlier so you can actually stay focused and focus on school. And even though I think, our parents had a really hard time sending us back to go to school, but they realized that it was very important for us to make sure that we were growing up with access to education, with access to the services that, were being provided. And, I'm very grateful for that experience, right? I'm grateful for the fact that my parents had me working out in the fields 8th grade year, as soon as I can get a work permit when you were 15 and a half, right? Because that discipline taught me not to be afraid of work. And I often quote my dad when I have a chance to speak about how he would always say that. And I never understood what it meant. Because when you're young, you're like, not be afraid of work. Like, I'm not afraid of it. I just don't want to be here, right? But now as you get older, you realize, oh, these moments when people need you, don't be afraid of it. Like, step into it. And I think that is what I keep in mind when I think about this work. And also, recently I heard somebody say that this might be the most important position I ever held in the most important moment. And I think that's for a lot of us in this moment, especially those that are advocating for our immigrant rights, who are trying to making sure that we're delivering programs and services to our immigrant communities, right? This might be the most important position you ever held, right? And I think that's something that I keep at heart, because if that's what it is for me, I want to make sure that I do my best at it. So, yeah.
Is there a sense of pressure you feel from that, from having maybe the most important position so far in this very specific time?
Yeah, it's both, right? There's a huge sense of responsibility, but a huge honor that comes with it too. I think the responsibility is to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can for our immigrant communities in a place where there's a number of pressures, whether it's from our elected leaders, our city leaders, to our community leaders, to our residents. So how do you balance? It's like a balancing act of all the needs in community, and then me having to hold that with my office and my amazing team to making sure that we can move this forward, and making sure that we're not only speaking for our immigrant communities, but speaking alongside our immigrant communities. So how do we do that in the different spaces that we're in? But also it comes with a huge honor. There is a tremendous honor that comes that I'm able to do this at this moment that we're in. So,
yeah, great. What's bringing you joy right now? So,
what brings me joy? I think right now I'm trying to celebrate every moment I can when it comes to the milestones we take in celebrating and uplifting our immigrant communities. Over the summer, annual basis, we host our Immigrant Rights Commission Leadership Awards, and we honor the contributions our immigrants make in San Francisco, from the arts to science to nonprofit advocacy to youth leadership to small business, and those moments when we get to celebrate each other bring me joy. I know it's difficult right now to find them and everything that's going on, but I try to make sure that I find those moments in community to celebrate one another. Recently I was also in a community meeting, and I wasn't playing a role, but just participating. That brought me joy because I was in community, right? I was there just observing. I was just listening to what folks had to share on a topic that's not even related to immigration, but it was in my own community, and being in those spaces brought me joy. It might seem insignificant, but it feels like I also was looking for those places of belonging, and I think that's important for me. So
yeah, I mean that's super real.
Yeah.
Jorge, before we let you go, I wanted to give you a chance, an opportunity to talk about maybe some initiatives or some work that you all are doing that we haven't been able to cover yet.
Yeah, thank you. I have kind of two responses to that question. So the first, just to share, we have developed a framework to meet the moment that we're in the city. And the first thing we want to do is make sure that our city departments are aligned, so that we're connecting with all city departments that are connecting with community directly, so they're prepared to meet the moment. We're also, secondly, connecting with different community organizations. So how do we align community? How do we support them is a second pillar of that framework. And then the last two are around our advocacy. As you all know, we are suing the federal government and multiple fronts. So we're continuing that as we also uplift the positive contributions of immigrants in San Francisco and continue doing our own advocacy. And then lastly, the other pillar to that framework is thinking about fundraising and resource allocation. So being intentional about how the city plays a role not only in funding services, but also helping fundraise and making sure that we're bringing additional funding to San Francisco. One of the things we're doing is Mayor Lurie just recently, in partnership with the San Francisco Foundation and other mayors in the Bay Area, launched a Stand Together Bay Area Fund to support fundraising efforts that would eventually go to community organizations so they can serve families that are being impacted by immigration enforcement, whether because they're nervous of leaving their home and living in fear, to folks who have been impacted by somebody in their household being detained or removed. So those are some of the efforts that we're leading in onto. And then lastly, just my message to our immigrant communities, very simple, is to stay informed. There's a lot of information out there. A lot of it can be not real. So really go to your trusted source for information to make sure you're getting accurate information and up-to-date information, because it's changing a lot and rapidly these days. 2, continue seeking city services. The city is a partner with our immigrant communities, and we really want to welcome you and feel that you're safe and comfortable to be using our city services. So report a crime. Feel free to continue visiting our clinics and so forth, right? And then lastly, make a plan. Have a plan in place. I know that through our SF Immigrant Forum, which is our main site for resources, people can find a lot of resources from legal to housing to transportation, but also there are tools there available for folks and families can make a plan just in case somebody is impacted by a federal enforcement agency. So thank you for the time. And
that was San Francisco Immigrant Forum.
Exactly, yes. So SF Immigrant Forum, again, it's a centralized resource that holds many services for immigrant communities, whether they're city provided or provided by community. There's also every 2 months we hold a webinar for service providers that are serving our immigrant communities on various topics, from know your rights to how to prepare to language access. And then we also have a listserv that anybody can join so they can share events, programs, services, activities that are meant for our immigrant communities.
Well, that's great. Excellent. Thank you so much. Listeners, If you enjoyed today's conversation, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this interview across all platforms. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us on San Francisco Revival.
Thank you again for having me. Appreciate it.